This is the Snodgrass podcast. Thank you guys for joining me today. I got a good friend on the podcast episode with me named Chris Kerns. Chris is a regional director for an organization called YoungLife. I'm going to tell you, I have seen personally YoungLife transform so many kids' lives. If you have a middle schooler, a high schooler, or a college-age son or daughter, you need to listen to this episode with Chris Kerns. He has given his life for the last 20 years to this organization of YoungLife, and they do camps, they do retreats, they do clubs, they do community. It is just an amazing organization, and if you want your kids to be around great other kids and a great community, check out this organization, YoungLife. I want you guys also to go check out our new website at irondeep.com. If you're interested in going to the Men's Awakening Retreat on September the 25th, make sure you go to irondeep.com and apply now. We only got a few spots left, so make sure you check that out. It's going to be amazing, guys. It's in the Rocky Mountains of Utah. We got about 30 max guys. I think we're up to about 25, 26 so far. So yeah, like I said, we got maybe 3 or 4 spots left. It's going to be amazing. All business owners and business leaders, and it's going to be really, really cool. So check out irondeep.com. Now I'm going to introduce you guys to Chris Kern. What's going on, Chris?
Hey, Brett. Appreciate you having me on, man. What's going on right now, I'd say we have 20 degrees cooler from yesterday to today, so experiencing a fun day here in Fort Wayne.
Yes, definitely. Last day before school starts. Are you excited for the last day, or is this like bittersweet? Because I know you guys typically have crazy summers. This was a little bit more relaxed for you, but what's it like going into to the school year for your family?
No, yeah, it's wonderful. I think it's a great season. It's a blessing that our kids want to go back to school. If they weren't wanting to go back to school, I think it'd be harder. But we did fun bike ride around the schools, praying for them with the kids, and just fun having a vision for praying for their own school and their friends' schools. So we had a fun day doing that this morning with some other Young Life Committee folks. It was good.
That is cool, man. That's a different conversation. I always have different conversations with you when it comes to family, when it comes to just riding your bikes around the school, praying for your school. Your family, it just does a little bit something different, and that's just why I love hanging out with you and chatting with you, and you make me think a little bit differently, a little bit more kingdom-minded, and I know we're going to really dive into that today because you've been with an organization called YoungLife for pretty much all of your career, except there was 1 year where you did something else, but and we're going to talk about YoungLife and how that has impacted your own life and transformed your own life. And then what you've seen with other middle schoolers, high schoolers, college kids, even adults' lives with YoungLife. But first, before we get into YoungLife, I want to hear about Chris Kerns. So talk to us about you, and maybe you can even dabble into kind of your own story of when you were a kid going to YoungLife.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm a product of YoungLife, really grateful for that. I grew up in the church, wonderful Christian family, but wouldn't say I understood what it meant to follow Jesus until I went to a YoungLife camp. So I went to club a little bit when I was in high school, St. Joe, Michigan, beautiful place, and didn't really know what it meant to have a relationship with the Lord. And the thing that probably jumped out at me the most was being at camp and experiencing this idea of community. Christian community. I didn't have a whole lot of friends that were Christians at the time, and that was really powerful. But then also this idea of a relational Savior. It wasn't just somebody who you prayed to and confessed your sins and went to a church service on Sundays, but it became real to me in that moment. And I think we all have, when you do come to know the Lord, we have that moment, right? Whatever that moment is, I believe the Lord had me in his hands the whole time, but pretty cool to have a defining moment when that became more real. But moved down to Indianapolis after high school, so that would have been 2002, and trying to spread my wings and jump out of the nest a little bit, and had a lot of really wonderful experiences down there, and slowly got involved with YoungLife as a volunteer. Wasn't ready, shouldn't have been a volunteer leader. I don't know who was the person who was saying yes to me, but they shouldn't have. I wasn't ready, but they gave me a chance, and that was wonderful, and got to grow into being a leader. And it was fun having a chance to be able to walk alongside some kids who I still am in contact with today. That was now close to 20 years ago. That was in 2003. So 19 years ago, being able to start walking alongside kids. And then that transitioned to getting involved more and more, turned into coaching football at Lawrence Central High School. and track, and just wanted to be a servant. Wanted to help serve the community and care for the community. Along the way, met my wife, Amber. We ended up getting married in 2007, and now have 4 boys, 4 wonderful, beautiful, just rambunctious, energy, testosterone boys. So 9-year-old down to a 4-year-old. And I'll tell you, we're having fun. Love being able to do ministry and do life together with my family. It's a strategic thing that the Lord has provided an opportunity for us to have. I know it's not something that everybody gets to have, and we're leaning into that. So we moved to Fort Wayne, though, 5, almost 6 years now ago in 2017, and to pursue Young Life further up here, and have really enjoyed our move to Fort Wayne. It's become home, especially for my kids. That's really all they know.
Man, it's quite the story. Thank you so much for sharing. You talked about kind of this moment when you were a kid going to Young Life, and what do you think it was? Because obviously you grew up in a Christian home, and you knew about Jesus Christ, and you heard about him. You had some knowledge about him, obviously, growing up in that atmosphere. I'm sure you went to church, but you didn't really have a relationship. So maybe just dive into that. And what was that moment like? Why was it different? You went to Young Life. What was different about it? Was the environment just different? Was the community different? Like, what was it about the environment and the opportunity that Young Life provided for you and your surroundings that was different than just the other experience that you had going to church?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think culture matters, and the culture that I grew up in and the church that I was in was wonderful for my parents' generation. Man, they really loved it. It was great. It was wonderful, and the school that they had built had a wonderful culture in it as well. So I think they really knocked that out of the ballpark. But they missed the component of being able to connect and relate the thing that they cared about so much that hid them in their hearts to the next generation, right? To the youth. They didn't have a youth group. They didn't have those things built into their ministry. And so it was a void. And I think it was just kind of expected that, well, you'll just jump on board with the culture of church and things that we love so much from our generation, that the next generation will appreciate that too. And I would just say it was a disconnect. And therefore, stepping into this Young Life world and this Young Life environment, the community aspect was kind of on a totally different level. I mean, we're doing crazy things, right? We're eating stuff you should never eat, like mixing things into a blender and putting all the McDonald's ingredients, putting a hamburger and fries and shakes and all that stuff, and then drinking it. And it's just like, what is going on in this place? This is bizarre. Making shapes out of everybody's gum. We can't do that anymore because of COVID or whatever, all that stuff. But everybody bringing their chewed gum and then just creating structures. And I mean, what is this place? But people were coming from all walks of life, Brett. Like that was one thing that really stuck out to me as a non-believer who didn't understand what was going on at this Young Life thing. Like, why are all these kids who don't know Jesus coming to this thing? Why are these Christian kids coming to it? And somehow it's working together. That really sparked my curiosity. Anyways, fast forward going to camp at the end of my senior year of high school, being able to experience that firsthand for a week. No distractions. For a week at camp as far as all the other stuff. Now, we didn't have cell phones at that time, so we didn't have that distraction, but we did have relationship things. We had jobs back home. We had all these other things that for sure distracted me, and having the ability to be able to engage in a spiritual conversation where I'm truly allowing my vulnerable self to be present with my friends, sitting around in a circle, we call it cabin time, and confessing sin. Being able to talk about insecurities, being able to say, this is who I am and I don't want to be that anymore. And then sharing that with other people who are saying the same things. It was the first time in my life where I really experienced genuine, open conversation with the hardest things that I've been trying to hide and keep from everybody else. I'd say I lived a double life. I tried to live a life where everybody saw one thing, but really on the inside, something else was going on. And that exposed that in me, and I was fearful. I was fearful that if somebody found out the real me, that I would be maybe rejected, or I wouldn't be allowed to be a part of that community anymore. I'll be made fun of or whatever. And the exact opposite happened. Instead, I received healing. There's a verse in James where it talks about if you confess your sin to one another, you will be healed. That concept became a real thing for me in that moment. And I think that was a big part of why Young Life was so different and why it connected to me. I mean, all the fun stuff, they were playing music I understood, and our culture we understood and liked. It wasn't just the churchy music. They really met us where we were. And I think those are probably the three main components as to why I was so drawn to it. And then obviously the main one is the Holy Spirit did his work, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what magic potion you put out there or magic product. The Holy Spirit's going to move in your heart, or he's not. That's where change happens, you know?
Yeah. No, that's definitely awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Just the things I got. You're in this undistracted environment, very intentional, and you had genuine community around you. And obviously, yeah, God showed up, encountered you, transformed your life, and that's amazing. Another thing that I got was you talked about maybe there was a generational disconnect. You talked about your parents, they grew up in a way, and that kind of worked for them, but there was a disconnect from them to you. And I want to ask you this today. I mean, you're growing up, you're in Young Life, and you're seeing a lot of kids in today's world. And sometimes I'm, as a dad, feel like there's this disconnect between me and my kids. And do you think that that's obviously going on today? There's also now, again, there's generational disconnect from our faith, how we received it, to our kids. And can you tackle that a little bit for us? I know it's a loaded big question, but what do you see about this generation, your parents to you, us to our kids, and how do we pivot with this?
Yeah, no, I think we're always needing to be thinking about that. I mean, our young people are changing fast. They do not, and youth have always kind of been in that category. It's a little bit now on steroids, I think, with social media and with cell phones. It definitely, things can transform quickly in a community. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, from my upbringing, there's just some we're going to do it this way because this is the way we've always done it. If you're stuck in a certain mode and you're not willing to adjust and adapt and be mindful of the next generation or the next group, or even if you're sitting in a room and even in just looking across the room and you're, let's say, in a cafeteria, just seeing kids who have a different background, a different culture, if you're not willing to step into their shoes and to learn and let them become an expert of their culture and their environment, then you're not going to be able to reach them. You're not going to be able to connect with them. And I think that's a problem that our churches have today that I think we're realizing, hey, we need to recognize who's down the street. It's not just generational; it's so many other things. But for parents today, I would say the art of being able to craft really good questions could go a long ways. Asking questions that isn't going to just be we call them different level questions. I was just in the GLS last week and the Global Leadership Summit, and there was a speaker, Vanessa, did a fantastic job talking about different levels of conversations. Level one conversations would just be simple questions like, hey, what's your job? How you doing? Or for a kid, it'd be, hey, how was your day? How was it? How was school today? That's a level one question. Okay. It's not triggering your brain to go deeper. Level two question might be something you can universally ask. It's not specific to the question, but it does go a little bit further. Hey, what's one thing that was hard today? What was one thing that was difficult? That's a level two question. Level three question, going to a more personal level, is picking up something that happened previously that you remembered and then taking it deeper. So remembering something from your previous interactions that you had and then asking a deeper question. How do you do that with young people? How do you have the ability to do that without having the dad factor, okay? Without having oh, dad, are you really going there? And I think this is the big difference. It's a level three question with something that they care about, okay? It's not just to get to, okay, I need to ask a question that's going to prompt something so that way I can make sure they get their homework done or get this agenda thing done that I want to make sure gets done as a parent, or it's a character issue you're trying to address with your young person. But what do they really care about? What do they care about? And how am I going to get to that in a way where it's going to cause them to kind of go, it's a really good question. I used this technique right away as soon as I got home after this conference with my 9-year-old. And I started asking some level three questions, and it was amazing to watch him light up like a Christmas tree. And he laughed. He kind of had this giggle at one point, and I said, "Why are you giggling?" He goes, "This is fun." I said, "What's fun about it?" "Well, you're asking me all these questions, Dad." And I'm like, "Man, I'm not doing anything different, but I am, right?" So I was thinking through a little bit deeper question, and that was really powerful. So I know that's super abstract and not.
I mean, it's super impactful, even just for me, because as a dad, we always get in that dad mode where we want to teach, we want to give them a lesson, we're trying to ask them a question so we can teach them something. Or we're digging for just the general, how was your day? And then we get annoyed and irritated because of the response isn't what we expect. And we're trying to connect with them, but we're just doing that surfacey level one. And I, for one, I'm kind of a deeper person. So when someone asks me and they start talking about what's the gas prices down there or what's the weather like, I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about something a little bit deeper, right? So our kids do the same thing. So that's awesome, man. Thank you so much for sharing. Just questions too. And I always hear this as parents more and more. We don't need to be lecturing all the time. We don't need to be stating. We're just asking better questions. You even taught me that, which I've actually been using. You talked about with the organization Iron Deep as question storming. You taught me that last week when we were at lunch together. And I used that, and I even sat down with a couple of guys from our organization. I said, we're just going to write out a bunch of questions, and we're not even going to answer them. We wrote out like 20 questions. So thank you for that. So you talk about YoungLife, again, great organization. I was checking out the website. It talks about the best week of your life, adventure, join the adventure. It's for every middle schooler, high schooler, college student, even adults. I know you guys got other things. You got Teen Mom organizations that you're doing and working with teen moms. So much good stuff. And I think every parent, especially as a believer, we want our kids involved with some sort of organization like YoungLife. But I see very few do it. Honestly, very few take the risk of trying to get their kids involved. So most of our listeners are parents. They're not the teens. They're not the kids. So what are some ways that we can try to get our kids involved with YoungLife or a similar organization because we want it so bad? Do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I have a lot of parents who ask that question. And I would say it's different for each person, right? We've got a staff person who is a mom, and she has a senior in high school, and they have such a wonderful relationship where he wants her to be involved in everything. So they host Bible studies in their home, and they do club together, and they go to camp together. I mean, that's a pretty unique situation, though, Brett. That is not the norm. So you have scenarios like that where you just have such a beautiful connection where the teenager has not said, "Mom or Dad, you're too cool. You're not cool enough. So you got to let me do my thing and give me space." I would say the majority, it's probably more in the other category. It's like, hey, give me some space. Let me go run off and do my own thing. And it's nice to have a place where kids can be totally themselves, and they don't have that adult parent influence in that particular setting. So I think both have value, and we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get involved with YoungLife, depending on where they're at. But speaking directly to parents, how do you get your kids involved? If I could tell you how many times a parent has said, "How do I get my kid to come to YoungLife?" Man, it's a commonly asked question, and I think it's a legit one, and I think it's one that we need to spend a little bit of time on. The first one, of course, is prayer, and I would imagine every one of those parents are already doing that, and they're saying, "Hey, prayer, without question, Lord, if there's one prayer that I have for my children that I've heard from other folks who've gone through the season of life that I've yet to go through with parenting, is we as parents have influence with kids for a period of time, and then we start to lose that influence, and we want somebody else to come in and reinforce the very things that we want our kids to have in their life." So praying for that mentor, praying, Lord, bring somebody else, if it's a coach or a teacher or a young life leader or a youth group leader, bring somebody else who's going to come in, and they're not going to be in that disconnected category during that adolescent season of life, but they're actually going to be in that connected part. And somehow, some way, when they say something, it's the same thing, but in a different way, it connects. And the parents are in the background saying, "Goodness gracious, I said the same thing, but for whatever reason, somebody else said it, and it lands." What I like to say is prayer works, keep praying. But two, we want to make sure parents are in the know. It's a partnership, right? So we want to make sure parents are aware of what's going on. They know when things are happening. They know when these camp trips are coming up. So when kids hear about things that we announce at club or wherever it might be and say, "Hey, we're going to go on this camp trip. Oh, by the way, there's a cost to it." They're a little nervous to go to their parents and say, "Hey, this thing's going to cost me X dollars." And they're nervous about it. When they go to their parents, they already know about it. They already know the cost. They already know the value of it because we've already had a conversation with them. So when these kids come to them and say, "Hey, I'd like to go to camp," they're like, "Oh, okay, well, we'll talk about it," and they're already saying yes, 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 and they want to be involved at that level, and they want to have their kids get involved versus a parent who is unaware of what's going on, and a kid comes to them and says, "Hey, I want to go on this trip," or "I want to go to club." their first thought is, well, what is this thing? It's pretty expensive. It's a negative first response because they're unaware. So number one thing is parents need to be involved with the staff person and need to know what's going on behind the scenes. So that way they are prepared when their kids come to them and say, I want to be a part of this. And then there's safety that goes along with that too. They know where their kids are actually going to be because they don't have to ask their kid, where are you going to be? They already know. So being in the know and prayer are probably the two most significant things that I would recommend at this point.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the feedback. Parents, guys, take notes on that. And I'm, for one, I raise my hand. Sometimes I'm unaware and I'm not intentional about these things because we got so many different things going on, and just to can be intentional about the environment that you want your kids to be in. How important, you talk about the undistracted environment, and my daughter and I experienced that a few weeks ago. We went to a camp, and I thought it was awesome, and just that undistracted environment. We don't know what it's like until we're there, how much we need that, and how important, and talk to us about this, like what are the kids' responses when they're in that undistracted environment without the technology and all these other things they have going on. How important is that for all of us at certain points, certain seasons or certain parts of the year, just to get into that environment?
Yeah, I'd say it's extremely important. You actually made a comment with regards to cell phones from that time that you had with your daughter that really impacted me as well. Talking about how we're immigrants into the technology world, so we have the ability as adults to be able to kind of separate ourselves from that. But these young people, they don't. This is who they are. It's a part of the social fabric of how they have friends and how they engage. So to take that away from them, you're not just taking away an optional convenience. You're actually taking away a part of who they are and who they identify as somebody who is connected in that world. But yeah, I would say I have one example. So I had a student years ago took to camp. This was a kid who was in a hard environment in an inner city situation down in Indianapolis. And this kid got into fights all the time, was getting kicked out of class, getting expelled from school, just had anger. He had a lot of anger. And, it's from trauma. It's from an unstable home, domestic stuff going on in the house. And fight or flight, he fought. And he fought a lot. And that's the way that he was able to survive. That was his survival mechanism. And I remember basketball, pickup games, all that stuff, and him getting into fights and me having to separate them and kind of help de-escalate the situation. But going to camp, I was a little nervous, like, hey, how is this kid going to fare in camp? And I got to watch him day 3 be a kid and laughing and no fighting. He's on the basketball court and somebody's crossing him up and he didn't like it. And instead of fighting him, he was actually able to shake it off and laugh because of that. And I was just really blown away by that simple truth for him that he needed to be in such a safe place to where he didn't have to puff up and he didn't have to become that person to show other people that he can handle himself. That's what happens in an undistracted environment. Now, how is that particular kid going to be able to experience the gospel if he's got he's reserved, right? And he's in a fight or flight situation. Well, he's not open to receiving one, the greatest news ever, and also to be able to contemplate how he's going to respond to it personally. Okay. He is somebody who had to have those barriers removed and to have a psychologically safe place. We talk a lot about that now in today's world, which I'm so grateful for. He had to be psychologically safe to be able to let his guard down. And that happens at camp. That happens in an hour at a Young Life club each week. The whole reason why we play fun games and we play music that these kids know and they're belting out to the top of their lungs together that aren't Christian songs is so that way those barriers can come down, so that way they can get to a safe place to be able to explore what their own experience with encountering the gospel will look like. And so we do that in microcosms in different places. And then at camp would be kind of the week-long expression of that. We even take kids to a discipleship experience where we'll go backpacking in the woods, in the mountains for a week. And we'll do a solo where they spend 24 hours alone by themselves. Brett, can you imagine a teenager doing that?
No, I can imagine as a man doing that. So, I mean, it even freaks me out a little bit, right? Because all these thoughts come into your mind. So yeah, definitely. Doing a 24-hour solo. So that's crazy. So it's just, again, it's almost getting them into that uncomfortable, challenging situation. I think I heard that is like, even as parents, we're trying to remove this uncomfortable adversity from our kids' lives. And that's how they grow, right? Just to be in those types of environments. So.
And it's how we grow too. We need to have spaces. So, I mean, there's a lot of different thought leaders today who are bringing up wonderful thoughts. You need 10 minutes every day. Break out 10 minutes throughout your day to where you need to stop, journal, reflect. But instead of just go, 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 we need to stop, and we need to have these white noise spaces where we can kind of just pause for a second.
Yeah, definitely. So you got 4 boys, and you talked about just incorporating your family into kind of what you're doing as well, and be able to bring them along, praying for your school. I know you do camps during the summer a lot of times, and bring your family. So, what's it like? You're raising up these other kids for the last 20 years, or not raising them up, but you're watching them, and now you have these 4 boys from 4 to 9, and I guess what's your biggest desire? I think I know the answer to that, but like, what's it like when it's your own kids? What's the difference?
Yeah, of course, the answer is I want my children to grow up fearing God and to loving Him more than anything else. Prayed it over all of the children for lunch today that were in my home, and it was really fun having the other parents having like affirming that in that prayer of, "Dear Jesus, please allow our children to walk with you." It's something that we can't we can't produce that. That's something that God does. We're praying for that. I'll tell you this story, Brett. I think that this has been really impactful for me. It's a great joy to have my family be alongside me in ministry. I know not everybody gets an opportunity to have that, but we do, and we're grateful for it. We don't take it for granted. I got a chance to share the gospel in front of kids at camp one summer, and for my kids to be able to see Daddy sharing the gospel and other kids responding and watching them transform literally throughout the week. There's a physical transformation of a spiritual change that happens. My kids get to witness that. Well, my son Nolan, crosstalk happened, and we send kids out for 20 minutes to go sit alone with Jesus. And he wanted to do the same thing with all the teenagers. So he, as at the time an 8-year-old, said, "Dad, can I go do that too?" And so he got a chance to go out and go sit with the Lord for 20 minutes. How many 8-year-olds can sit silently for 20 minutes? That's unbelievable. And contemplate their relationship with their Savior. I think that was just a really cool thing. And that's something I want to continue to allow to happen. But the camping ministry is a unique one. This will be a shameless plug, Brett, for something you're coming with as well. But family camp, I'll tell you, anytime we can go on an adventure with our kids and be able to experience this together, I think that's a really important thing. And Young Life does offer a family camp experience, and it's something I believe in. And so watching my son do the zip line, watching my kids do these things that are stretching them emotionally, they're fearful stepping off that first step, and then being able to translate that into spiritual truths. Hey, when you stepped off that platform, what'd you feel? I was scared. What happened after that? Well, I felt safe because I was secure. And how did you get to that point? Well, Daddy, you told me I'd be safe. Okay, same thing. You can translate that to spiritual truths. Hey, right now it's scary to think about, maybe it's a move or going into school for your first day. I'm nervous about going into my first day of school. Tell you what, you're nervous, but just like that platform, when you jumped off that thing, you had some confidence. How'd you have that confidence? We're going to do that in prayer. And also having relational connections with other people too helps a great deal. But one other thing I would say to this question too, how do we instill faith in our kids? There's another organization in town that I wanted to mention that I believe in a lot. It's New Mercies. It's a hosting ministry for kids who are at risk of going into foster care and being able to host kids in your own home. I'll tell you, there's something that is very transformational when you are serving and your own children are not only just involved because of proximity, but they're needed. We had 3 Spanish-speaking boys in our home at one time, and we needed our kids to step up, and we needed them to, 1, work on their Spanish, but 2, they needed to become friends with these kids. And that was a formational thing for them that shaped and formed them. I hope one day my kids will be able to look back and say, you know what? My parents hosted kids who didn't know Jesus and needed help, and we did that. And that's going to hopefully shape their faith journey as well.
Oh, man. I love that. And so a couple things I just want to kind of point out. You talked about family camp, and I've done a lot of daughter camps and son camps. You talk about Young Life, just teen camps. I think I would just really encourage all of our listeners out there to do something. These are so fun, by the way, but they're fun with such a great purpose. And so we do fun vacations all the time. Everyone that's listening, they do fun vacations. They go to Disney World. They do the beach stuff. whatever it is, whatever your thing is, they do that. But I would just say, hey, I would really encourage you this next season, this next summer, do something. It's going to be awesome, fun, but with such a purpose. Maybe it's a family camp, maybe it's a program, and you don't have to do anything either. You go, you show up, and everything's just laid out for you, and it's just so much fun. So thanks for pointing that out. And then the next thing is just serving alongside your kids. And I think just instead of teaching and lecturing and giving them information and giving them knowledge, and we're all burnt out from all the stuff, the knowledge is just go serve, just go do something, be the hands and feet of Jesus. I think is really, really cool. So thanks for that, Chris. Chris, we're about out of time, man. Any last feedback, any last words of wisdom for our listening audience on the Brett Snodgrass podcast today?
Yeah, no, I would just say if there are parents who are currently watching right now, and as you're going into school, I want to let you know, one, we're praying for you. But two, you can lean into this new season of having teenagers, young people that you get to steward and care for, and lean into those conversations. Be prayerful about how to engage your kids in this new season, and the Lord will meet you right there. I know it's not easy as a parent, but you need to have a cheerleader, you need to have an encourager, and as somebody who works with youth and gets to watch other people doing that, you are a vital piece. You are not a bystander when your kids are kind of pushing you away. They need you, and they need you even more now than ever, and that may be just prayer, but it's also in partnership. So please lean in and don't shy away, especially when things get hard.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And this is a wrap. Chris Kern, it's been awesome having you on the Brett Snodgrass podcast today. Thanks, you buddy. God bless.
Thanks so much, Brett. Yep, have a good day.